As I teased the lesson earlier this morning about help, it's easy for most of us as Christians to give our problems to Jesus, but the question is, can you leave them there? Can you have faith that they will be addressed there? And overcoming the tendency that all of us have of wanting to give the problem to Jesus, but we don't see a solution right away, so we kind of want to bring it back and deal with it on our own. Can we resist that temptation? And that's what this message is designed to at least talk about today. And the text of it is taken from John chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. And Richard, we've really missed you. It's so good to have you back home. It really is, brother. Hear your mellifluous voice and your thoughts about Corinth. Thank you for sharing that. Mellifluous. See, yeah, well, it's one of the things that you get as a bonus here coming to Oak Hill. You get at least one big word every Sunday. Adds to your vocabulary. You are. John chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. The next day there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities. So Jesus' mother told him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, that's not our problem," Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." But his mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, I know we've got lots of dads in the audience, and I think you as a dad can identify with this, because if you want to see a father's face go pale white, all you need to do is position yourself nearby as he discovers these three words: some assembly required. You see, what we wanted was a gift for our child. What we got was a project. So we go about retrieving all the minimal tools necessary to put this project together. Typically, a screwdriver, a hammer, and then usually some sort of utility truck that's got every conceivable other tool available to help us assemble this some assembly required project. What follows are several late night hours. I can remember this, preparing these kinds of gifts for the kids for Christmas, staying up late at night. Usually I would do it on Christmas Eve. So I'm up till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how A goes into B, how D is bolted into F, and how R is supposed to just somehow move over Z. I mean, I never could figure all that stuff out, and I would hope that no one noticed that I had skipped steps 4, 5, and 6 altogether. In fact, I'm firmly convinced that the devil is actually in the details of toy assembly, and somewhere in perdition is a warehouse full of spare toy parts. Some assembly required. Not the most welcome sentence, but the truth is it's an honest one. For instance, marriage licenses should probably include the words, "some assembly required." For some, maybe even really super bold print. Job contracts should probably come with the words, "some assembly required," maybe in bold letters. Babies should exit the womb with some sort of a tag that says, "some assembly required," as we've got Addie and we've got Kinley and Maya. Life is a gift, but it comes to us in many ways unassembled. It comes in pieces, and sometimes, quite honestly, the pieces just don't seem to fit. Part A doesn't always fit in very easily with Part B. And inevitably, there's always something that seems to be missing. You see, church, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Sometimes the pieces of life just don't seem to fit. And when they don't, our response is to take the problem to Jesus. And our example for that is Mary, his mother. John chapter 2, verses 1 and 2 tell us, "The next day there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. Now, I will tell you, in Cana of Galilee, as it relates to this particular wedding, it was a common wedding. The bride wasn't the daughter of a king, and the groom wasn't like the prince of some sort of sultan. Were it not for one particular detail, the event probably would have gone completely unnoticed. The detail that was given to us, however, was significant, because the detail that we were provided was the guest list. And the guest list could read something like this. There was Benjamin of Capernaum who was invited. There was Simon the craftsman who was invited. Saul the rabbi of Cana was provided. And farther down the list, we see Jesus of Nazareth was listed as an invitee. And the family had invited Jesus apparently to the wedding. And since Jesus always goes where he's wanted, Jesus and his disciples traveled to Cana for their first excursion, kind of as an entourage. And while they were there, verse 3 tells us the wine supply ran out. And I don't know why. I'm just kind of conjecturing with you. I mean, maybe someone apparently underestimated the size of the crowd that was going to show up. I don't know that they necessarily sent out RSVPs, so they wouldn't know how many people were coming to the wedding. I don't know. Or maybe they underestimated the appetite of the guests, or the depth of the wine vats, or the number of the friends that Jesus would bring. Remember that these wedding feasts typically lasted for a week, so it would be easy to underestimate any of those particular variables in the equation. Regardless of the reason, however, the bride and the groom, they've run out of wine. And I think there's an analogy that we can draw from that particular set of circumstance, because what's run out in your world? I mean, maybe your department ran out of cash, or maybe your team ran out of solutions, or maybe you just flat out ran out of gas, just out of something. Life leaks, we find, in many different ways. We have places where things go that we don't know where they went, and how it got away from us, and how time leaves us so quickly. We cannot always figure out, because life in some ways is kind of leaky. We run out of stuff. We run out of energy or time or compassion or grace or forgiveness. We just run out. But in this particular story, we have interstage right Mary, who is the mother of Jesus. Now, in my opinion, I think Mary appears far too infrequently in the Bible. Because after all, I mean, who would know Jesus better than his mom, right? I mean, she carried him for 9 months. She breastfed him for more months. She heard his first words. She witnessed his first steps. She was the ultimate authority on Jesus to the extent that there could be a human ultimate authority. She was his mom. So on the rare occasion when we see her speaking in the Bible, it kind of makes us want to stand up and take notice. Because we see in verse 3, Jesus' mother told him, "They have no more wine." Now, I don't know what kind of inflection you want to read into that, or what kind of inference you want to read into that, but I gather from this statement, telling Jesus they have no more wine, she wasn't really being bossy. She didn't say, oh, Jesus, those cute little newlyweds, they've just ran out of wine. So, son, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go down to the local vineyard on the corner of Grape and Juice Street, and I want you to take those Merlot branches, and I want you to cause them to grow great growth, and I want you to make wine and bring it back. You know, we don't see Mary doing that. She didn't try to fix the problem herself, and she wasn't critical either. She didn't say, you know what, Jesus, if only those people had planned better. Wow, people just don't think ahead anymore, do they? What is this world coming to? The world is going over the cliff, Jesus. Come on, help this couple. I don't know what got into them, but they really need your help. So let's get on it. Right? She didn't do that either. She didn't blame the host, and she didn't blame Jesus either. She didn't say, "What kind of Messiah are you anyway? Wouldn't you have known that they were going to run out of wine? Wouldn't you have allowed them to plan better? What kind of Savior are you? If you were really in control, this never would have happened." She didn't say that. Nor did Mary blame herself. "Oh, Jesus, it's all my fault. You need to punish me because I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The wedding is ruined. The marriage will collapse. It is singularly, solely my fault." You don't see Mary doing that either, right? She just stated the problem. Very simply, they have no more wine. Jesus' response is, "Dear woman, that's not our problem." Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." But his mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." John chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. Now, originally, I think you can gather, Jesus had no intention of saving this particular wedding banquet. It wasn't on his itinerary. What he was going to perform as his first miracle, he just didn't want to do it then. He said, "My time has not yet come. This isn't the right place, the right time, the right set of circumstances for me to show my divinity with my first miracle. Mom, you don't know what you're asking. My time hasn't come. It's not our problem. Let's just move on." But then Mary enters the story. Someone that Jesus loved dearly, his mom. She walks into the story with this genuine need. And in my imagination, I can see Mary after she says, "They have no more wine." Then she turns to the servant and says, "Do whatever he tells you to do." Here's what I see Mary. I see Mary as like all serene, all happy, big smile on her face, easy gait, not worried about a thing. Her eyes reflect this absolute calm. She is untroubled because she's done everything she was supposed to do. She identified the problem, she brought it to Jesus, and left it with him. She trusted him completely, so much so that she told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And in my imagination, I can also see Jesus kind of smiling just a little bit, like, "Whoa, that's pretty bold, Mom. I just told you this isn't the right opportunity. And then you tell the servants, 'Do whatever I say'? Wow." Good one, Mom. I appreciate your trust in me. I appreciate your confidence in me. And no, this wasn't the appropriate time that I had, but God's put these circumstances into place, and so let's give it a go. And so at that, Jesus said to the servants, this is verses 7 and 8 of the same John chapter 2 passage, "Fill the pots with water." And they filled them to the brim, and he said to them, "Draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." Now, we know from the story that the master of the feast, after he's had this cup brought to him, is licking his lips and saying, "Oh man, this is great stuff. Thank you for saving the best for last." And he lifted his glass and he toasts the bridegroom and he compliments them for serving the best wine for the end. And while the master of the feast notes the quality of the wine, the writer of the story, John, wants us to observe the quantity of the wine. 6 stone jars capable of holding 30 gallons apiece. The servants filled them to the brim, so they didn't shortchange the filling of these pots. So at Jesus' command, water, H2O, becomes an abundant, Merlot, Cab, Pinot Noir, whatever, I don't know. But it becomes abundant, and it's really, really good. And a quick calculation reveals that the quantity of wine that Jesus changed with a word equivalates to 908 bottles of wine. That's what I thought. I'm thinking, this newlywed couple could have opened up their own little winery boutique in Napa with 908 bottles of wine, right? You see, Mary presented the problem. So we have problem presented. We have prayer answered. We have crisis avoided, all because Mary entrusted the problem to Jesus. Now, there's another version of this story, however. Were you aware of that? Here's the other, pardon me? Here's the other version of that same story. But in this story, Mary never bothers to involve Jesus. She takes the master to task for his poor planning. He then takes exception to Mary's accusations. Mary gets a little huffy, and she storms out of the wedding. Now, by this time, the groom has overheard the argument between the person in charge of the feast and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and he loses his temper. His bride turns to him and says, "Honey, the marriage is off. If you can't keep your temper, you certainly can't run our house." And by the end of the day, all of the guests leave sad. The marriage has ended before it ever began, and Jesus just stands there shaking his head, saying, "I could have helped if only I'd been asked." Now, that version of the story isn't in the Bible, but I think the principle applies. How many disasters, church, could you and I have averted if we'd simply go first in faith to Jesus? Thank you. You see, the encouragement is take all of your problems to Jesus. Don't take your problems to the bar. Jim Beam's not going to help you out with any sage advice. Don't take your problems out in a tantrum. Tantrums aren't going to advance the cause. The moment you sense a problem, however large or small, the encouragement consistently in the New Testament is take that problem to Jesus. Here's what the Apostle Paul writes to the church in Philippi, chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs, and don't forget to thank Him for His answers. Because if you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than the human mind can even begin to comprehend. His peace will keep your thoughts and your hearts quiet and at rest as you trust in Christ Jesus. You see, church, an unprayed-for problem is just like an embedded thorn. It festers, it infects. It starts first in the finger, and then it kind of metastasizes to the hand, and then it goes to the arm. And the best thing that we could do is go straight to the person who has the tweezers. And how would that look on you, for instance? Well, I want you to imagine this. It's breakfast time, and the family is in utter chaos. The daughters are complaining about their brother who took too much time in the bathroom. As a result, the girl's hair isn't curled, it isn't even dry, and they certainly haven't gotten around to putting on their makeup. Mom is doing her best to manage this little mini conflict, but she woke up with a headache and a list of things to do a mile long. Dad stops in the kitchen entryway and surveys this pandemonium that's going on before him, and he weighs his options. Option number one, command everyone to shape up and behave. That'll solve the problem. Or option number 2, berate his son for dominating the bathroom and his daughters for their poor planning and his wife for not taking control. That doesn't sound like a very good option either, does it, Naomi? Naomi shaking her head. No, that's not good. Okay, well, here's the third one. Sneak out before anyone notices. I mean, that's option 3, right? That's what he could do. How about another option? How about turning to prayer? How about the dad saying, Father, you are so good. I need your help. Could you reduce the frenzy and the pandemonium in my family? Please, God, thank you. Will that prayer change anything? Well, it may. But at least the dad has put the problem in the hands of the one who can solve it. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Let me conclude with a story about a doctor. Her name is Helen Roosevelt, and she was a missionary doctor who spent 20 years in the Congo at a clinic and at an orphanage. Now, when Helen had been there for almost 4 years, a mother unfortunately died amidst labor, leaving behind, at this point, a very premature baby and a 2-year-old little girl. So Dr. Roosevelt thought, well, we got to do something. The problem is, in the Congo, she didn't have the benefit of an incubator, and she didn't even have electricity. So what's a doctor to do? Her first task, obviously, was to keep this premature newborn warm. So she sent a midwife to fetch a hot water bottle. The nurse returned, but with really bad news. The good news is, we have a hot water bottle. The bad news is, when I tried to fill it, it burst. And even worse, we don't have any spares. So Dr. Roosevelt instructs the midwife to sleep near the newborn, to keep that newborn as warm and comfortable as possible, and they would seek a solution the next day. Now, a solution here in the Congo is not very easily found in these kinds of circumstances. The clinic was in the heart of the jungle, first of all, and help was hundreds of miles away. So the following noon, the doctor mentioned her concern to the children in the orphanage. She told them of this frail little premature baby and the sad 2-year-old sister. So a 10-year-old girl named Ruth decides to take the problem to Jesus, and here's literally what Ruth said. Please, God, send us a hot water bottle. It'll be no good tomorrow, God, as the baby will be dead. So please send it this afternoon. And while you are about it, would you please send a dolly for the little girl so she'll know you really love her? Yeah, 10-year-old. Now, at this point in time, the doctor is stunned. I mean, she appreciated that prayer, but that prayer could only be answered by the arrival of a parcel from home. And after nearly 4 years at the clinic, she had never, ever received a parcel from home. And even if one came, who in their earthly mind would include a hot water bottle to an orphanage in hot? Why would you send a hot water bottle to a place that is already hot enough? Well, someone did. Later that afternoon, a 22-pound package was delivered to Helen's door. And as she called the children to help her open this package, she felt tears welling up in her eyes because she's thinking, could this really be an answer to prayer? So they pulled off the string and unwrapped the paper, and in the box they found bandages, they found jerseys, they found raisins, they found sultanas, and a brand new hot water bottle. And at the bottom of the box, a dolly for a little girl. And church, that box had been shipped 5 months earlier. You see, our God had heard little Ruthie's prayer before she even said it. You know, church, sometimes pieces just don't fit. Sometimes the wine runs out. Sometimes the water bottles burst. These are just the facts of life. But Jesus responds with this invitation: bring your problems to me. State them simply, present them faithfully, and then trust Him reverently. Because the odds are, given the stories we've read and heard about, you'll be raising a glass and proposing a toast before you even know it. Jesus says to cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. Not just some of it, not just the hard parts, not just the easy parts, but all of it. And the question for us is, first of all, will we do it? And second of all, when we do it, can we be like Mary? Do whatever He says. You see, Mary, in her mind, she identified the problem, she told Jesus about it, and then she told the servants to do what He says. Mary, apparently, in her mind, was absolutely convinced that her son Jesus was going to fix the problem. She didn't know how, she didn't know when, she didn't know why, she didn't know anything about it, but she knew enough about her son to tell the servants, do what He says. That's immense trust. And that's the kind of trust that we are being asked to put into a God who cares for us, into a Savior who died for us, and a Son with whom we can share an inheritance. So this week, your prayer doesn't have to be complicated. We've been talking about prayer now for a month. And if there's one guiding concept that I've been trying to share with you, is that your prayer doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be said at a particular time or in a particular location. In fact, your prayer can be one word: help. The challenge is, when you ask for help, let Him, and move on to the things where you can be of help to others. Because you see, church, in times in which we are in need, and if we will give it to God and allow Him to provide us that help, it frees us up of the anxiety and the worry of worrying about our situation. We've given it to God. Now we can focus on, I can be of help to somebody else, to whom God has directed to me to provide them the help that they asked for. God works in mysterious ways, doesn't He? And I've given this analogy, and I'll conclude with this. Life, to me, is like the back of a needlepoint, right? You all know what a needlepoint is. A lot of times you put it in these bands and you stretch the material, and maybe you get a diagram, or maybe you just freeform it. But you know, you've got this colored string and this really pretty pattern, and by the time it's all done, it's usually something that's suitable for matting and framing and hanging on the wall. But before that project is done, or even at its conclusion, have you looked at the back of it? It's a mess. There's no pattern to it. The colors are going everywhere. The string is in knots going all different ways. And if you thought life was looking at the back of your needlepoint, you would just say, well, this is not life. This is a wreck. I don't get it. But if you could flip it over and see the pattern that had been divinely inspired for you to work on, then you could see the beauty of the creation behind the mess at the back. So don't focus so much on the needle point and the back of it. Focus more on God's design and plan for you. And His design and plan for you is to love you and to care for you and to be with you in eternity. But it's also to put you in places where you can be of help to others. And the best way that you can help others is not to be too distracted by the problems of your own. And the most easy way to resolve the distraction is to take it to God and leave it there. Elliot, can you advance the next slide? Count your blessings. I'd really encourage you to do that. There's people in Florida and Houston who have lost or will be losing everything. They're talking about a storm surge that could be 12 or 15 feet high. I mean, to give you some idea, that's taller than most houses. They're going to be underwater. And they're going to be wondering, where is God in all this? You hear that already. And they're going to be wondering, is there help? Well, yes, there is. And maybe the help comes from a church like us. Maybe it comes from a prayer from you. Maybe it comes from churches all over to provide assistance to people who are in need. And perhaps it provides a message of not just hope, but the fact that God is in control. But at some point in time, this is all going to come to an end. And which side of the equation do you want to be on? You want to be on God's side, or do you want to be on the other side? Because being on the other side is like waiting for help to come with a 15-foot storm surge and you're swamped. It's not going to. So church, this week, let's be mindful of giving our hopes and our dreams and our concerns to God and just leaving them there. So it frees us up of time so we can be of help to others. And the one way we can do that is to count our blessings. So if you have a prayer request, now would be an appropriate time for you to bring that up. And at the conclusion of this song, we'll talk about those and be dismissed. Let's stand, please.